Hello, my name's Helen, and not long ago I thought I had everything under control. I was the lead architect on a city project I poured my soul into. Then one morning, my boss smiled, shook my hand, and filed my design under his name. The next day, I was fired for not being a team player. But it didn't stop there. They locked me out, turned my coworkers silent, and worst of all, my own daughter started asking why I cried in my sleep. Still, what they didn't know was, I kept every file. Now their building is cracking, the media's watching, and I'm no longer quiet. But how far would someone go to bury the truth? And who's really left standing when the dust clears? The overhead lights in the conference room always made everything look too clean, sterile, like a hospital. That morning, I walked in expecting a routine project sync, the kind where we updated Russell on progress and nodded through whatever he'd decided before the meeting even began. But today, the air had a different weight. No one looked up as I entered. No jokes from Sam in planning, no half-hearted wave from Rachel in budget ops. Just silence. Russell Kane sat at the far end of the table, hands folded over a closed laptop. His expression was unreadable. Not smug, not apologetic, just blank. "Let's get started," he said flatly. I glanced down at my notepad, still believing we were talking about the Solstice project. I'd spent the last 3 months perfecting that proposal. Every weight-bearing point, every sustainable material spec, every detail. It was the most critical public infrastructure blueprint our firm had touched in years, and it had my name on it. Or at least it should have. Russell clicked the remote and the wall screen flickered to life. What appeared on it wasn't my design. Not entirely. The color-coded overlay of the load distribution grid looked familiar, only it was wrong. Very wrong. The secondary reinforcement I had flagged as unstable last month had somehow returned. The adjustment I made to avoid structural fatigue at the core truss? Gone. My hand went up before I could think. "Is this the version that was submitted?" I asked, voice calm but sharp enough to draw glances. Russell didn't even turn his head. "It's the final version," he said. "Approved and submitted. Let's stay focused, Helen." I blinked. "That's not the file I finalized." He waved a hand. "There were late edits. It's done. We're moving forward." The room stayed quiet, but I saw a few eyebrows twitch. People knew. They just didn't want to be the ones to say it. I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding. I didn't speak again during the meeting, but I was already rewinding the last week in my head. After we adjourned, I went straight to my desk. I logged into the archive server. Nothing. The file folder I'd created, Solstice Final Knox, was empty. Every file time-stamped within the past 7 days had been wiped clean. I moved to my sent folder. My email from 5 days ago, subject line, "Structural Integrity Risk Load Core Truss B," was gone. I tried to restore it from my deleted items. Nothing there either. I called it. The guy who picked up sounded half asleep until I gave him my name. Then his tone sharpened. "Miss Knox, your admin access was changed 2 days ago. You're now read-only in the project drive." "Who changed that?" I asked. He hesitated. "Request came from exec level. That's all I can see." I ended the call without saying thank you. That's when I felt it. Not fear, not even confusion, just something colder. A deliberate chill. Someone wanted me gone. I grabbed my coat and headed for the elevator. As the door slid shut, I heard my name. Trevor Hadley, junior architect, one of the few I actually trusted, slipped inside the elevator just before it closed. He didn't look at me right away, just reached into his coat and handed me a flash drive. "Check the backup server logs. Look at the timestamps," he said quietly. "You're not imagining this." I opened my mouth to ask more, but he was already stepping out on the next floor. That night, I sat at my kitchen table long after Marin had gone to bed. Her empty cereal bowl still sat in the sink. She had tried to get my attention earlier, asking what movie we were watching this weekend. I'd mumbled something about being busy and walked past her. Now my laptop glowed in the dim light. I opened the files from the flash drive. Every document bore my metadata, timestamps, version history, author tags, my revisions, my notes. Then I pulled up the last autosave of the deleted email. I'd exported a PDF version to my local folder, just in case. The warning was clear. Core truss at 17.2 m tension is unstable under current spec. Risk of failure without reinforcement exceeds 13% under high wind. My signature was there. My concern was clear. I wasn't being paranoid. They had cut me out of my own work. They buried me with my own design, I whispered to no one. I sat back in my chair, feeling every muscle lock into place. Not because I was scared, because I finally understood. I wasn't just a scapegoat. I was a liability they needed out of the way. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the screen. One contact stood out. Dana Legal. I didn't press it. Not yet. From the hallway I heard Marin's voice. Mom, are you okay? I swallowed the words I wanted to say and whispered instead. Not yet. The morning after discovering the deleted files, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the blueprints. My version, and the one Russell paraded in front of the board. I spent the night pacing, sorting through backup folders, rereading notes, trying to calm a fury I hadn't let myself feel in years. At 8:17 a.m., a Slack message pinged on my phone. It was from Meredith in HR. Russell wants a quick sync. Room B2, 15 mins. No subject, no agenda, no context, just that. I stared at it for a long moment, heart already in my throat. I knew what this was. You don't schedule ambushes on calendars. When I arrived at room B2, it was already half lit. No assistant, no coffee tray. Just Russell sitting at the far end of the table, flipping slowly through a manila folder. He looked up like he hadn't seen me walk in. Helen, he said like we were about to talk about the weather. Have a seat. I didn't. I stood across from him, arms crossed. He pushed the folder toward me with 2 fingers, then leaned back, fingers tented like this was just business, like it wasn't about to change my life. Effective immediately, we're terminating your contract, he said, with no more emotion than if he'd been reading a parking notice. Lack of alignment, resistance to internal process changes. This isn't personal. My throat tightened, but I didn't blink. Lack of alignment? I repeated slowly. You mean refusing to co-sign a structurally unsound design? He didn't flinch. We need team players. Your last few months have raised concerns. He slid a bottle of water across the table like a peace offering. I didn't touch it. I had half a mind to ask if he'd rehearsed that speech. Then I did what no one expected. I sat down. Did you tell the city board the blueprint you submitted wasn't mine? I asked, voice even. Russell smiled. That smile. The smug one he used when he thought he'd won something. The city doesn't need every name attached. We consolidate ownership for clarity. I stared at him. He was trying to rewrite the story while I was still in the room. You'll receive a formal letter within the hour, he added. Meredith will walk you out. And just like that, it was over. I stood slowly, pushed the folder back toward him. You didn't even have the spine to delete my name yourself, I said. He didn't respond. Of course not. Men like Russell don't talk once they've decided someone's no longer useful. The walk back to my desk felt like dragging myself through thick fog. I passed people I'd collaborated with for 5 years. No one looked up. A few shifted in their chairs like my presence made them uncomfortable. One person, I think it was Lana from finance, actually turned her monitor to face the wall. When I got to my desk, Meredith was already there. She handed me a white envelope and a cardboard box. I'm sorry, Helen, she said, but her voice held no conviction. She looked down as if she might disappear through the floor. I'd like to retrieve my personal files, I said. It has locked down all systems per protocol. You no longer have access. My ears rang, but I nodded. Of course. They'd planned this. Every step timed, every file scrubbed. As I placed the few things I had into the box, my mug, a notepad, a photo of Marin and me from her 6th grade science fair, Meredith hovered beside me like she was monitoring a flight risk. She finally handed me one last thing, a printout. This is your final performance review, she mumbled. I didn't open it until I was outside, standing in the cold parking lot, Denver's skyline looming behind the building. The paper shook slightly in my hands. Consistently meets expectations, does not proactively lead cross-departmental initiatives. That's not what it had said 3 months ago. Back then, I was rated exceeds expectations in all areas. Meredith had told me herself in a one-on-one. She even emailed me the summary, one I'd foolishly never backed up. They didn't just erase my design, they rewrote who I was. I sat in my car for a while, the air thick, box on the passenger seat, review sheet crumpled in my lap. You think when something like this happens, you'll cry, or scream, or drive straight to someone's office and slam a door. But I didn't. I just stared at the building that used to feel like mine and whispered, "They want me to disappear." And then, as the last bit of sunlight faded from the Denver skyline, I whispered back to myself, "But not this time." 2 days later, I stood outside Kane and Rowe again. Same building, same glass doors. But I wasn't the same woman who walked out with a cardboard box. This time, I came early. I didn't want the pitiful glances or the false whispers. I just wanted my last few belongings and to leave with whatever dignity they hadn't managed to erase. I swiped my badge at the entrance. Red light. I tried again. Another beep. Another red flash. Behind the reception glass, the security guard stood slowly like he'd been waiting for me. He didn't speak right away, just walked over and nodded toward the far wall. "You'll need to wait over there," he said quietly, avoiding my eyes. "Someone's coming down to escort you." My face felt hot. I was being treated like a stranger at my own funeral. A junior admin I barely recognized from HR eventually came down, eyes fixed on her tablet the entire time. She didn't say my name, didn't even greet me, just walked ahead without checking if I was behind her. Inside, the air felt colder than usual. Or maybe I'd just gotten better at feeling it. My cubicle looked like a motel room after a quick checkout. Someone had already packed most of my things, badly. My sketchpad was bent, and the ceramic mug Marin had painted for me had a chip on its rim. I gathered the last of what was left. One potted fern, a flash drive I thought I'd lost, and the photo of Marin and me from the science fair. Her braces smile, my coffee-stained blouse, our matching lanyards. No one around me looked up. The clack of keyboards kept going. The occasional printer beep filled the silence, but not one person said a word. Across from me, Greg, whom I had coached through 2 certifications, shifted his screen slightly so I couldn't see it. Cowards don't always wear armor. Sometimes they just shrink behind Dell monitors. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I moved like I was made of glass, clear, fragile, invisible. As I turned toward the elevator, my phone buzzed. It was Lana. She was one of the junior analysts I'd mentored when she first joined. Brilliant, shy, too polite to interrupt even in brainstorm sessions. "I'm so sorry, I wanted to say something, but we're all being watched. HR told us not to talk." I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. "I get it." But I didn't. Not really. This wasn't about fear, it was about something worse. Acceptance. They had seen it happen, seen me erased in slow motion, and decided it was safer to sit still. I dropped the phone into my coat pocket and stepped into the elevator. Someone I'd worked with for 5 years was already inside. I remembered when his kid broke an arm at summer camp. I'd chipped in for the get well basket. Now, he stared straight ahead like I was wallpaper. I offered a faint smile anyway, not for him, but for myself. Let them see I walked out tall. At the building's exit, the receptionist didn't even pretend to know who I was. Outside, the November wind had picked up. I paused at the curb, fumbled for my keys, and glanced down at the last box. It was lighter this time, literally and figuratively. They had taken my job, my title, the credit for my design. But they hadn't taken my name. Not yet. As I reached the car, another text came in. "Trevor, found something else. If you ever decide to push back, I'm in your corner." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then I typed back, "I might." I saved his number under a new contact. Witness #1. I stood beside my car, staring at the Kane and Rowe Tower. It shimmered under the morning sun like it had something to be proud of. Let them think I was done. Let them think I was gone. I loaded the last box into the trunk and closed it with deliberate force. Let's see who they turn on next. By the time I got home, the afternoon sun was dipping behind the buildings in Capitol Hill. The apartment felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against your chest. I dropped my keys in the bowl near the door and noticed Marin's shoes already by the mat. She was home early. I found her at the kitchen table, fully dressed, backpack zipped, staring blankly at the muted TV. The local news ran a story with bright graphics and scrolling text, but the volume was off. Her cereal sat untouched. The toaster hadn't been used. "Hey, sweetie," I said gently. "Want me to write you a note for school?" She shrugged. Not a yes, not a no, just indifference. I wanted to tell her everything, that her mom wasn't crazy, that she was right to look scared the other night. But I couldn't pour that weight onto her, not when she was already holding too much. She eventually stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked past me without a word. That silence hurt worse than any boardroom betrayal. Later that afternoon, as I was sorting through emails on my personal laptop, rereading the message I never sent to Sophia, I noticed a missed voicemail. It was from Marin's school. "Hi, this is Miss Delaney, Marin's counselor. I just wanted to flag that Marin's been quieter than usual. She's missed a couple of quizzes and hasn't turned in her science packet. She didn't show up for homeroom this morning. We're not trying to alarm you, just thought you should know. Please call me back." I hit replay, twice. How had I missed it? I'd been so buried in trying to salvage my own name, I hadn't realized hers was starting to fade. When she got home, I tried to act normal. I asked how her day was. She grunted something about math class and locked herself in her room. Dinner sat untouched. That night I found her curled on the couch under the quilt my mother made years ago. Her phone was face down, her headphones unplugged. She wasn't asleep, just pretending. I sat beside her and waited. "You were crying last night," she said suddenly, voice low. I froze. She looked up. "You don't have to pretend with me. I know something's wrong." I swallowed hard, blinking back the sting. "I didn't want to worry you. I thought, if I held it together long enough, I could fix it without you ever knowing." Marin pulled the blanket tighter. "You don't have to carry it alone." There it was, the sentence that cracked me open. I didn't cry in front of her, but I reached over and took her hand. Small, still soft, but stronger than I gave her credit for. After she went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen counter. The house smelled like lavender from the diffuser she'd refilled, probably trying to calm me more than herself. I opened my laptop. Subject line, about the Solstice Project Confidential. I didn't know who I was writing it to yet. Maybe Sophia, maybe the city review board, maybe just to myself. But I began typing. I detailed the edits, the missing calculations, the internal warnings that vanished, my name being stripped. Then I saved it to drafts. I wasn't ready to send it, but I was ready to see the words on the screen. The next morning, as we drove to school, Marin barely looked at her phone. No music, no complaints, just quiet presence. When we pulled into the drop-off lane, she turned and looked me straight in the eye. "Whatever happens next, I believe you," she said. That nearly undid me. I watched her walk up the front steps, her shoulders a little straighter than the day before. If they weren't done trying to break me, then I wasn't done fighting. The Denver sky was unusually pale that morning, a flat stretch of overcast gray that felt like a warning no one wanted to read. After dropping Marin off, I parked outside my building, sat in my car a few extra minutes, and opened my email. At the top of my inbox was a message with no sender name, just a subject line. "If you talk, you'll regret it." No greeting, no signature. The body of the message was empty, just the echo of a threat. I stared at it. For a moment, my thumb hovered over the trash icon. Maybe that was the smart thing to do. Pretend I never saw it, walk away and keep breathing easy. But I didn't move. Fear crept up like a cold draft under a locked door, familiar, unwelcome. And this time I let it settle. Not to let it win, but to remember what it felt like, what it meant. The next message came that afternoon while I was making tea. Different sender, a burner account. Subject, check truss B. Attached was a grainy photo, clearly taken on site. The cracked underside of a support truss labeled and time-stamped, December 2nd, 11:47 a.m. A single line sat beneath it. "You know this collapses under full load? You built it. Kane's name is on the permit. But your hands made the bones." My stomach turned. This wasn't just paperwork now. It wasn't just politics or corporate theft. People could get hurt. I stared at the image until the mug in my hand went cold. Then I called Trevor. He answered on the second ring. Helen, I can't talk long. I need you to tell me the truth, I said. Is it real? The truss? The crack? A pause. Then, it's real, and it's bad. Why hasn't anyone stopped it? Because if Kane pulls the plug now, the entire contract implodes. The mayor's office goes public. Investors start asking questions. It's not just one job, it's a domino chain. Too many reputations are wired into that structure. I closed my eyes. So what? Everyone just pretends it's safe? Another pause, then softly. That's the plan. After we hung up, I opened the draft email I'd saved days earlier. I read it again. This time I didn't hesitate. I updated it, added the crack photo, the message, and highlighted structural notes. I pulled up time-stamped versions of the real design, attached it all. Then, just before hitting send, I whispered aloud to no one, "This isn't about revenge. This is about responsibility." Click. It was done. That night, I sat at the edge of Marin's bed. She had just finished brushing her teeth and was bundling herself into the oversized hoodie she loved. "Hey," I said, "there's something you should know." She looked up, sleepy-eyed. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you things. Comfort, friends, safety. Marin didn't blink. "But I want you to know, telling the truth is never wrong, even when the world wants you to believe it is." She stared at me for a second. Then, without a word, she wrapped her arms around me and squeezed. I held her tight, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was unraveling. Later, I cleaned up the kitchen, answered 2 job board notifications, and collapsed into the couch with the news playing in the background. Local politics, a snowstorm coming, a traffic closure. Then my phone rang, no name, just unknown caller. I debated ignoring it, but something in me clicked. I answered, a man's voice, low, measured. "You should have kept quiet." The line went dead, but his voice didn't. It lingered like static in my chest. Low, threatening, certain. I locked the phone, placed it face down on the coffee table, and sat completely still. Outside, the snow had started to fall, a gentle curtain drifting past the window. It didn't help. Nothing about that call felt gentle. It was the kind of voice that didn't bluff. By the next morning, the snow had thickened into slush, crusting the sidewalks in gray. As I stirred coffee in the kitchen, my phone buzzed. Trevor. They fired Miguel, just like that. Walked him off site. No notice. My hands went cold again. Miguel was the engineer who sent me the crack photo, the one who risked his job to say what no one else would. Kane and Rowe wasn't just silencing me, they were scrubbing the narrative clean. I messaged Trevor. "Is he okay?" He replied, "Scared. They made it look like he violated protocol, but you and I both know it's retaliation." I didn't respond right away, because I knew what came next. Later that afternoon, a package arrived. No return address, just a plain brown envelope hand-delivered. Inside, a flash drive and a note from Trevor. "This was buried in old approval archives. Thought you should have it before it disappears." The drive contained scans of the Solstice blueprint, stamped with Russell Kane's approval, and beneath it, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. Same font, same name. But the angle was off, the spacing clumsy. And when I zoomed in, the pixelation around the signature was a clear sign it had been copied and pasted from another document. Forgery. They didn't just take my design. They faked my consent to validate their lies. My breathing slowed. Not from fear this time, but calculation. I stared at the screen. This was the smoking gun. By evening, I had Dana on speakerphone. She was a labor attorney I'd worked with during a discrimination case 3 years ago. Sharp, unapologetic. She listened carefully as I laid it all out. The stolen design, the forgery, the threatening call, Miguel's firing. When I stopped talking, there was a pause. Then, "Helen, you have them." I didn't answer. "We're talking constructive dismissal, IP theft, retaliation, potential safety violations. If you want to press charges, we do it now. If you want to go public, also now." I exhaled. "We go public." Dana's tone didn't shift. "Then let's burn the house down." I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder. The original design, my notes, the deleted email I'd saved, the cracked truss photo, and now, my fake signature under Russell's name. I compiled it into one PDF, clean, chronological, damning. Then I opened a new email and attached it all. Subject: Urgent, Structural Risk and Forgery Solstice Project. I addressed it to 3 journalists I trusted. 2 of them had covered construction fraud in Chicago last year. The third was local, tenacious, and already suspicious of Kane. In the body, I wrote, "My name is Helen Knox. I was the lead architect for the Solstice Project until I was removed without cause. What follows is proof of safety risks and design fraud committed by Kane and Rowe. They didn't just steal my work. They endangered lives." I didn't sign it with a pseudonym. I signed it with my name. I clicked send. I sat back and stared at the screen. No bells rang, no thunder cracked, but something shifted. Later that night, as I folded laundry on the couch, Marin wandered in. She sat beside me, legs curled beneath her. She didn't say anything for a while. Then, "Are they going to come after us?" I met her eyes. "They already tried, but I'm not giving them the last word." She nodded, not quite reassured, but not afraid either. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat that way, quiet but connected. I tucked her in early and kissed her forehead. By midnight, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Tweets, emails, message requests. My post had gone viral. There was disbelief, outrage, demands for answers. Then, just before dawn, I opened the front door to get the paper. On the mat sat a thick manila envelope. No postage, no address. Bold red letters across the front: cease and desist. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like it was daring me to touch it. A clean white rectangle, unassuming but heavy with implication. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee, hands trembling just enough that I had to steady the mug with both palms. I turned on the TV, not to watch anything in particular, but to drown out the kind of silence that settles when your life is on the edge of becoming something else. I needed noise, static, distraction, anything but the silence that had followed me ever since the post went live. But the universe doesn't always give you what you want. Sometimes it gives you clarity when you least want it. I hadn't even taken my first sip when the headline lit up the screen in sharp white letters: Russell Kane breaks silence on Solstice scandal. The mug froze halfway to my lips. My heart sank, then surged, adrenaline slicing through the fatigue like a wire through cloth. The feed cut to a high-production podcast studio, all moody lighting and sleek branding. Russell wore those oversized headphones, leaned back like this was just another casual conversation, a PR exercise disguised as vulnerability. The host leaned in, hungry, performing sincerity the way people do when they're selling you poison with a smile. Russell's voice, too familiar, too calm, filled the room. "Look, I respect Helen, I really do, but some people aren't built for pressure. She got overwhelmed, made assumptions. It happens." Then he smiled. That professional, measured grin, the one he wore when investors were watching. Not everyone's cut out for leadership. The host gave a solemn nod, like Russell had just dropped a truth bomb instead of quietly assassinating my reputation. And then came the worst part, the comments. They were already pouring in like a busted dam. "She's clearly just bitter. Typical disgruntled ex-employee. Of course she's playing the victim. Yawn." I set the mug down harder than I meant to. Coffee sloshed over the side, a dark ring forming on the counter. My jaw clenched so tightly it popped. He wasn't just playing defense, he was rewriting the narrative and doing it with charm, polish, and just enough plausible deniability to make people doubt the facts. My phone rang. "Dana," I answered. "Don't say a word yet," she said immediately. "This is a classic PR play. He's controlling the narrative before you can." "He doesn't even deny the risk," I said, pacing. "He just paints me as unstable." "That's the game. Undermine the messenger so the message doesn't land." But he's forgetting one thing. "What's that?" Dana's voice sharpened. "Receipts." 37 minutes later, Trevor sent me a message. No words, just a link and a note. "You're going to want to sit down for this." I did. The video was grainy, black and white, time-stamped a week before they fired me. Security footage from one of the glass conference rooms. No audio manipulation, no edits. Just the ugly truth, playing out in real time. Russell sat across from Meredith from HR. He leaned forward, speaking in a low but perfectly audible voice. "We need her out before she starts asking more questions. If we move fast, she won't have time to react." Meredith shifted uncomfortably. "We could cite misalignment, or maybe lack of cooperation?" Russell nodded. "Keep it vague, clean." I watched it 3 times, each time colder than the last. There it was, the whole strategy. Not just incompetence, not just betrayal. This was coordinated erasure. Premeditated, signed, sealed, and now broadcasted. They didn't even try to hide it. They thought they were untouchable. Not anymore. By noon, the video had already found its way to Twitter. Blogs picked it up within an hour. TikTok breakdowns were splicing the footage with my design files, timeline graphics, even audio overlays from Russell's podcast. The contrast was damning. The hashtags were spreading faster than wildfire. #Helen was erased, #Kane collapse, #DesignGate, #Women in STEM deserve better. I hadn't said a word yet, not publicly, but suddenly I didn't need to. The world had seen enough. Trevor texted again. "You've got momentum. Use it." I tried pacing the living room, but it wasn't enough. I couldn't burn off the buzzing in my veins, the split between rage and vindication. I'd been holding my breath for weeks, and now everything was pouring in all at once. Noise, light, attention. Then Jenna messaged me. The reporter I'd sent the internal blueprint files to, quietly, cautiously, weeks ago when I still wasn't sure if I'd ever use them. "National outlet wants a live segment. Prime time. Are you ready?" My phone buzzed again. Dana. "You have 2 options now," she said. "Interview or lawsuit. But either way, you lead." I stood in the center of my kitchen, breathing hard. The envelope still sat on the counter. I glanced at it one more time. No. No more letting them shape my story. No more waiting for permission. No more letting someone else press record. I walked to my desk, sat down, turned on my webcam. My reflection blinked back. Hair a little messy, eyes a little tired, but sharper than they'd ever been. "Let's start with the truth," I said, pressing the red button. And I began. Not to recover what was stolen, but to finish what they started. The video interview aired at 8:07 a.m., nestled between a breaking storm alert and a segment on political upheaval. Not exactly the prime slot, but the placement didn't matter. What mattered was that it was out there. I sat on the edge of my couch, hands wrapped tightly around a lukewarm mug of coffee. The screen flickered with my own face, an eerie, out-of-body experience. The lighting was neutral, the studio background clean and forgettable. But my voice? Unmistakable. "This isn't about revenge," I said in the interview. My eyes held steady, shoulders square. "It's about accountability. When shortcuts risk people's lives, silence is complicity. No tears, no theatrics, no clever sound bites. Just the truth, laid out with citations, timestamps, blueprint evidence, and a tone that made clear I wasn't asking for sympathy." By noon, the clip had done more than make its rounds. It had gone global. Architects from San Francisco to New York posted it with captions like, "Watch this, required viewing, finally." Engineers commented on the structural concerns I'd raised, backing my claims with their own experience. A Reddit thread dissected every minute of the interview like it was a courtroom deposition. Even LinkedIn lit up, which almost never happens unless someone's announcing a promotion or pretending to love networking. But this was different. This was a reckoning. And then came the fallout. By the end of the same day, Kane and Rowe issued a brief, stilted statement. Russell Kane has been placed on administrative leave pending a comprehensive internal review. I read it twice, unsure whether to laugh or scoff. They hadn't even bothered with the usual, "we stand by our values" fluff, just clinical damage control. But the control didn't last long. That night, screenshots from Kane and Rowe's internal Slack channels leaked. Someone, likely more than one someone, had had enough. The messages were damning. Board members questioning Russell's judgment, calling his podcast appearance reckless, and openly discussing the firm's declining public trust. Has he jeopardized investor confidence? Time to reconsider executive leadership entirely? By Wednesday morning, Kane and Rowe was trending on Twitter, but not for any project. "Kane and collapse," one user wrote. "Karma and retribution," quipped another. And then, simply, Helen was right. Employees began resigning. Not assistants or interns, but people with real authority, real proximity to the rot. 2 senior partners from my old team published open letters on Medium. One wrote, "I watched what happened and stayed quiet. That was a failure." The other, "The system failed her. And all of us." I read them both twice. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. There's no real victory in watching a legacy unravel, especially one you gave years of your life to. There was grief, yes, but not regret. Because this wasn't my destruction. It was theirs. Late Thursday evening, as I stared at an unread pile of emails, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then picked up. "Miss Knox?" a voice asked, smooth, calm, and vaguely familiar. "Speaking." "This is Joanna Berkeley." I sat straighter, the name sinking in. Joanna Berkeley, head of Berkeley Design Collaborative. Industry pioneer, sustainability guru. One of the few women who had shattered the architecture industry's glass ceiling without ever softening her spine. "I've followed your work since the Sanderson restoration," she continued, "and more recently, I've followed your courage." My heart thudded once, heavy in my chest. "I don't want to just applaud it," Joanna said. "I want to work with it." I blinked. Work? With it? "I'm launching something new. A firm that centers transparency, ethics, and sustainable architecture. People first. No shadow games. And I need someone like you. Someone who's lived the cost of silence to help me build it. From the foundation up." I didn't answer immediately. The words felt too big, too sudden to trust, like they belonged to someone else. "I won't take silence as a no," she added, a smile evident in her voice. "But I hope you'll consider it." I exhaled, then said what I hadn't said in months. "I will." And then quietly, "Let's build it better." The next morning, another headline appeared across news outlets and finance blogs alike. Top investor exits Kane & Rowe amid ethics scandal. Backs whistleblower instead. The story named names. One of the firm's largest backers, previously touted on Russell's speaking circuits, had publicly pulled out. Their statement was blistering. "Our investments must align with integrity. We support professionals like Helen Knox who prioritize safety, truth, and transparency." I stared at the headline until my eyes blurred. Then I opened my inbox. It was full. Dozens, no, hundreds of messages. From women in architecture, young interns, burned-out project leads, students, even mothers. One stood out. "I watched your interview with my daughter. She's 11. When it ended, she turned to me and said, she didn't cry, she didn't yell, she just told the truth." We both cried after. They weren't reaching out to congratulate me. They were reaching out because they saw themselves in me. They were saying, "Thank you." That evening, I received a message on Signal, encrypted, private, and from someone I hadn't expected to hear from again. Meredith. "I still have access to internal audits. I hope you won't need them. But if you ever do, I'm here." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "Thank you, let's hope we don't." And I meant it, because this wasn't about burning it all down. It wasn't about making Kane & Rowe suffer. It was about what came next, about what could be built in the ruins. That weekend, I walked through a dusty, untouched office space with Joanna. It had exposed brick walls, old wooden beams, and floors that creaked with every step. Sunlight filtered in through tall, grimy windows, casting a soft gold across the concrete. It didn't look like much, but it felt like possibility. Joanna looked around, then turned to me. "We'll name it together." I ran my fingers along the edge of a window pane, dust lifting into the morning light like smoke. I smiled. "This isn't where it ends," I said. "This is where it starts." The first days of January came soft, wrapped in gray skies and the hum of possibility. At Berkeley Knox Studio, the heat clanked through the old vents, and the walls still smelled faintly of fresh paint and concrete dust. We hadn't finished furnishing the space, no flashy desks or designer chairs yet, but I had a window, a sturdy table, and a coffee mug that said, "Design like you mean it." And it was mine. No one could take this one from me. Marin would stop by after school, drop her backpack in the corner, and spin endlessly in the only swivel chair we owned. "Are you famous now?" she'd ask with a grin that dared me to answer. Not really, I'd say, just louder than I used to be. One afternoon, I was writing project notes on a legal pad when Joanna walked in with the local newspaper folded under her arm. I didn't need to look at the headline. I'd already seen it flashing on my phone all morning. 10 Women Redefining Urban Space in 2025. My name was number 4. I didn't read the full article. I didn't need to, because for once, my value didn't hinge on someone else acknowledging it. Later that week, I found a cream envelope sitting on the studio mailbox. No return address, just my name in black ink, slanted and careful. Inside was a handwritten note. I was gaslit for so long, I thought I made it all up. Your story reminded me I wasn't the problem. I was just in the wrong place. I quit yesterday. Thank you for the mirror. It wasn't signed. Just the words, former Kane and Rowe employee. I pinned it next to a crayon drawing Marin made years ago. Us holding hands under a bridge labeled Mom's Project. Every now and then, I still searched Russell's name online. Nothing new had appeared for weeks. No statements, no new ventures. The last update was a vague blog post from a leadership newsletter about stepping away to reflect. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful about watching someone vanish into their own silence. But there was peace in the absence, like standing outside after a storm. One morning, I walked into the architecture department of a nearby university, guest speaker, ethics in design. I stood in front of 20 bright-eyed students, some barely 20, scribbling notes with furrowed brows. We teach how to calculate load-bearing walls and energy-efficient lighting, I told them. But we need to teach something else too, how to stand your ground when someone powerful tries to silence you. A few heads nodded. One young woman in the back raised her phone to snap a picture, and I let her. The bell rang, and I stepped outside into the crisp Denver air. When I got back to the studio, Marin was already there, curled up on the couch, half done with her math homework and sipping hot chocolate from a travel mug. She looked up as I walked in, set down her pencil, and tilted her head. You look taller when you walk through this door now. I laughed. That's because I'm not carrying dead weight anymore. We shared a quiet moment, her gaze watching me scribble something on a notepad. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't need to. She watched me in silence, then said in a voice that didn't quite belong to a child anymore. You don't talk about what happened, but you don't have to. I watched you build something no one could take. I didn't answer. I just smiled. And I kept sketching. There's something about losing everything that teaches you what you never needed in the first place. If you're watching this and you've ever been overlooked, silenced, or made to feel like your voice didn't belong, trust me, I know that silence too well. But here's the truth. Silence doesn't protect you. Speaking up might cost you something, but staying quiet costs you more. I thought I had to choose between being respected and being safe, but I learned you can't build a solid future on someone else's lies. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to sign your own blueprints, not just in work, but in life. So if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own struggle, your own voice, your own fight, don't let it end here. Let me ask you this. Have you ever stayed quiet when you should have spoken up? What did it cost you? Or was there a moment you chose courage over comfort? And what happened next? I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. If this video touched you, even just a little, comment A or tell me which state you're watching from. And if not, tell me why. I'm here to listen too. And hey, if you want more stories like this, stories that fight for truth, voice, and justice, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next. Because the next story might be yours, and it deserves to be told.